What makes an idea great? Is it intellect or is it passion? Is it a brain thing? Is it a heart thing? Can you have one and not the other, or does it take both? Hey everyone, I'm Mr. Chaffin, and today's topics are some of my absolute favorite to teach because I like to talk about big, earth-shattering, world-changing ideas. And so as we talk about the Declaration of Independence today, we're going to get into like what it was and who wrote it and all of those things. But more importantly, we're going to dig deep into the ideas that are built into it. So let's get started. All right, first things first, the D.o.I. was written over a several-month period in the summer of 1776. Thomas Jefferson, who was the primary author of the D.o.I., was nominated or selected to be part of a 5-person committee, including John Adams, Ben Franklin, Robert Livingston, and a guy named Roger Sherman. They were nominated by the Second Continental Congress, which, one of their purposes in meeting was to write the D.o.I., and we'll learn later to sort of name George Washington as the leader of the Continental Army. But the whole point of the D.o.I. was not to be a government. Jefferson was saying this himself. He said, the D.o.I. is not a government. It's basically a breakup letter. That's a great way to think of the Declaration of Independence. It's a breakup letter with Great Britain, and it lists all the reasons why Great Britain is such a bad partner in the relationship and why the colonies want out of that relationship. And so I'll read a quote from Jefferson to kind of give you a sense of what he was thinking about this. He says, "It's to place before mankind the common sense of the subject, in terms so plain and firm as to command their assent, and to justify ourselves in the independent stand we are compelled to take." And this was actually a pretty common theme of the colonies right before the Revolution, when many writers were publishing works based on the idea that the colonies just needed to break away from Great Britain. And the most famous of these writers that pretty much we all hear about in this revolutionary era is T-Pain. No, not that T-Pain. This T-Pain. Thomas Paine was an English-born patriot that wrote, pretty much a point-blank explanation of why America needed to break up with Great Britain. And, he wrote it in this little pamphlet, and it's appropriately named Common Sense. So the ideas that went into Common Sense and the D.o.I. were not originals at all. They were actually the work of another Englishman named John Locke. And Locke was long gone by the time that Jefferson had used his ideas in the Declaration of Independence, but he definitely did make a mark on the way that we look at government and the way we look at rights and the way we look at freedom. It must have been the nose. So back to our mind versus heart debate earlier, a couple of Locke's best ideas actually just kind of make you go, duh, even I could have thought of that. Big idea number 1, all people are born free and equal and with what he called natural rights. Things like life, liberty, property ownership. In other words, every single person is born with an equal amount of power. There's no one born with more or less power than the next. And so, really what that means is that these rights are what you are born with. They're God-given rights. And so governments don't give them, and therefore governments cannot take them away. Big idea number 2, governments exist only because we create them. So, no self-autonomous killer robotic governments exist. Yet. It is 2020, so I say yet. But what this means is that government needs permission to do 2 things, okay? It needs permission, 1, to exist. It also needs permission, 2, to have power. And so, in other words, a government exists only to protect the natural rights of the citizens, according to John Locke. And he describes this relationship as a social contract. It's like the government is locked into a contract only to protect the natural rights of its citizens. And so the way that Locke kind of sums up this idea is in what he calls the consent of the governed. And so consent means permission. The governed are the citizens. And so the government needs the permission of the citizens to do anything. Lock that one away for future use. See what I did there? All right, big idea number 3. If for whatever reason that government does become tyrannical and abusive to its citizens, those citizens have the right to overthrow that government and replace it with a new and improved version of government that will protect their rights. So just a quick word on that. We're not talking about disagreement or hating a particular person that's in government in order to accomplish this overthrow of government. We're actually talking about when the government itself becomes so tyrannical and abusive that they start passing laws to remove your freedoms or destroy your property. It's very obvious then to see how Thomas Jefferson used these ideas in the D.o.I. About the only word that he chose to rephrase was the term natural rights, and he replaced it with the term unalienable rights when he was describing those rights that people were born with. So let's read. All right, so I'm going to read word for word the introduction and preamble of the Declaration of Independence. So let's see if we can spot these 3 big ideas right there at the beginning. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government." You see, different, but not really. And it goes on from there to actually list out 27 different complaints that the colonists had against King George III and Parliament. These complaints had a special name. They were called grievances. Now, a grievance is a complaint. So just a few of the grievances that the colonists listed were things like taxing without their consent, quartering soldiers in their home, taking away trial by jury, taking away their governments, and cutting off trade. So things like mercantilism made the list. In the original draft, actually, Thomas Jefferson included a grievance that actually kind of accused the king of violating the natural rights of slaves by continuing to allow the slave trade to exist in particularly the southern colonies. Okay, and so this issue in particular is pretty controversial, but there's no denying that the language and moral conviction of the D.o.I. sort of set the stage for abolitionists in coming decades to not just make a social or spiritual or religious cause for abolition, but actually a political one. So sort of this idea that America itself, with the Declaration, was founded on the idea that all men are created equal. Wow, so many big ideas. I know that I can't handle any more, but if you can remember 2 things from this lesson, you will be golden with today's topic. Number 1, can you define and list examples of unalienable rights? And number 2, can you define and list examples of grievances found in the Declaration of Independence? Hey, there you have it. You've officially been schooled by Mr. Chaffin. Until next time, work hard and be nice. That's what it's all about. If this video helped you out in any way, be sure to hit that like button. Let me know that you understand this topic just a little bit better after watching it. If you want more videos like this, hit the subscribe button. I'll be sure to send more content your way. And until next time, y'all take it easy. Later, guys.